It was,
Okay,
can you hear? Perfect.
All
Okay.
right, great. So all in favor of approving the consent agenda? Aye,
As changed.
okay. As, yes, okay. What do we need?
No, it's fine. I did have a couple of questions on the statistical report, but just information.
Okay,
So I don't know, does that mean we have to pull those too?
I don't think so. All right, so the rest of the consent agenda is approved. Now we are moving to discuss just briefly, the library and museums director activity report. I have that. I just want some clarification on a couple of these things. It says we worked with PG Library on auto renewal. Does this mean it's going to be happening? Or is happening,
Auto renewals already
already happening? Okay,
implemented. And everything that was checked out after that date. So
Okay.
you'll get notifications, and if it doesn't renew, you'll get.
and what was the date? Recent?
fairly recently.
I believe it was December. I don't remember the exact date, but it was.
As I haven't happened to me yet, so I wasn't aware.
So no more emails saying, hey, Bob, friendly reminder, you have a book due in 2.5 days.
You'll still get reminders, and we still have all of the settings out there, and it will tell you, also the emails will tell you whether an item renewed or not. I believe, right? The ones that
I think you still get the courtesy reminder 3 days before, but if you forget to go in and renew your books, then you get a notice saying that your items have been renewed
So it's
on the date that they would have been due.
yeah, so I'd have to look back at my, David and him and myself met with Pacific Grove Library about the messaging, and I have to look at how the standard, because we had to figure out with PG about when those messages came out 3 days before, the day of the renewal, anything like that, so I can.
So it's not in fact due on a certain day because it's going to be auto renewed by the organization.
Well, but if it has a hold, it won't.
Oh, I know,
So
holds are-
it keeps that due date. December 4th,
So
but it
anything-
only applied to items that were checked out after December 4th.
So anything checked out after December 4th, but they're still gonna get an email says that it's due.
In 3 days, yes.
But it's not due in 3 days, because if they forget about it, they go out of town and don't return the book, then the organization, the library is gonna.
We'll renew it, unless it has a hold on it.
There's a message on it. If you check your account, it says this item will auto renew. It says on.
But not in that message. I mean, that's gonna be terribly confusing.
So you get a message, like, for example, I just got a message that told me. Right. For renewed, and it gives me a list of the items. I get a message on there with auto renewal, because it's basically saying you have items that are due on these dates, and it's telling you ahead of time. Because not everything is going to auto renew, because if there are items on hold for other people, it won't auto renew. And then on the date that it comes through, you get a notice. Items were auto renewed, and it gives you a list of the items that were actually auto renewed.
And is there a second auto renewal or?
Yeah.
Okay,
If they're not auto renewed, then you get a message saying you're late.
Right, you'll still get in there. So for example, I had an email, personally had items checked out, 3 items due, and on this one, it was January 18th, just for friendly reminders to let you know that you have 3 items due soon. And it says the date, January 21st. And then on, what was that? And then on 21st, I get an automatic renewal notice stating these were 3 items that were renewed. And it states which 3 items were renewed on that record. So that's what I got on our record is the 3 days before saying these items are due. And then a notice on the date they're actually due, whether they were renewed. So that's kind of how the message is going right now.
And similar is for a book from PG Library that happens to be checked out from here or.
Yeah, that's handled the same way.
Yeah, because they're all handled the same way between both.
But maybe, with, I think what Bob was saying is that you have things due in 3 days. It could also say, unless there's a hold on it, it will auto renew in 3 days. So it tells you that, so it's not confusing. Is that, for that?
At a minimum, yeah. I mean, I think there shouldn't be anything set out and said, saying you have a book due in 3 days. Because, unless there's a hold on it, okay, with that exception. Because the person doesn't really have to show up at all now, sorry. 3 days from now. So I think it should just say, your book, is due in 3 days. And will not auto renew because there is another
Because it's all.
patron with a hold on it.
So one thing to keep in mind is we don't create the entire system. This is something that we are in an open source system, Bywater, and we're working with multiple catalogs and multiple systems. So we could set specific rules and parameters for how this works, and we're trying the best that we can in terms of making it work with Pacific Grove, with ourselves, with another library. And to note that the library director at Pacific Grove worked at Carmel, where auto renewal has been happening for quite some time. And so we worked with them directly about like the messaging for how this would go forward. So what we can do in terms of header and footer on some of the emails, I think we have to look at how we can potentially adjust that for whether it will go through, but
That's what the system does.
it's the system is setting on like notifying people yes or no, notifying days ahead. But there's a lot of if, ands, or ors that we can't build into that system because it won't know. If you say it's due in 3 days, but then somebody places a hold after that on the next day or the day after that, we're not entirely sure if there's going to auto renewal at that time.
But I would also think that if you have a book, you finished it and it's lying around and you get that notice, you're more likely to bring it back than if you finished it and it's lying around and it auto renews and nobody knows it, then you'll keep it for 9 weeks. So, you know, it's an encouragement also to just return something that you're done with.
I guess what you're saying is the current reminder that says your book is due in 3 days with no mention of auto renewal. Sort of guards against somebody coming in and saying, hey, how come I got a fine? I didn't return the book because it's supposed to auto renew. And you said, we never told you that, right? Because the email just says it's due. And then the next email just says, lucky you, 2 of your 3 books auto renewed, but we're gonna find the heck out of you on the 3rd one because somebody else had a hold. Or congratulations, all 3 have been renewed, right? That's the way
But
it
you know,
works.
you can renew from the app. So really, there's no excuse for not doing it.
Okay, I just think the fewer potentially conflicting pieces of information we send people's way, and the more often we contact them, the more confusing things can get. Now, maybe none of this will happen. I'm just thinking of like insurance. You don't want to ever have to use it, but you buy it.
Has Pacific Grove had this in place longer than us?
No.
Okay,
So
everybody went by.
We turn it on and it turns on for both.
And it was for both. Okay.
Well, I must say that I checked out a book from Carmel before the holidays and they sent me numerous
Yeah.
email notices about, you have just checked out this, and then this is due then. And then, oh, the book drops and the library will be closed, so your book is automatically renewed. And, oh, your book is automatically renewed again. Anyway, I guess more information is better than no information, but it was just kind of interesting to see. So, any other questions about the directors?
I just have a little one, you were talking about Eddie's Eats, which probably will have a new name. What kind of place, I mean, are they envisioning it to be kind of what it was before, for high school kids for snack services? I mean, I don't know what information
Yeah.
is divulged, but to just let us know what kind of operation they're talking about.
Yeah, so I would say with that, one of the options that we talked about was to do possibly a blue zone preferred or something with the healthy options available, so it is not selling candy bars and sodas and things like that, unhealthy things. You know, so what are the kind of options that are out there? And that was one of the things in the request for proposals, and also looking at whether we have nonprofits or businesses out there. So I'll say the space outside is I think one space that could be, we should potentially look at later on. We talk a little bit about, you know, potentials for outside, but I think that because there's not in my mind, there's not a great like window to walk up at or seating. There's not anything that we provide up there. So anything would have to be negotiated with a vendor about any seating or, you know, naming and seating or anything like that. So we haven't come across anything with naming or anything. And we did put a vendor towards our property manager to look at the contract, being a property manager that works on number of contracts throughout the city, you know, throughout the ward and other projects through there. And we're waiting for their feedback on looking at that proposal. You know, we'll come back. And I know that Sports Center was looking at they were looking at their own proposal as well. And I don't know, Francesca, did you want to mention anything else on there?
Just that the food is slated to be healthier. There will be some options for I think a variety of people. So they did submit a draft menu that included vegetarian wraps, but then there was also a cubano, which was a pulled pork ham sandwich, and breakfast burrito, a pizza slice, chips, another variety. That will be something that will be discussed though as well with the library. So we'll have some oversight as well.
Yeah.
Into what it is. So it's not solely soda.
I assume the hours that the vendor is open in Eddie's Eats would have to conform no more than the hours that the library itself is open. And that's what, mid-afternoon till the very early evening right now. So I doubt breakfast burritos would be an option.
They're interested in opening in the 10 o'clock hour.
Pardon me?
They're interested in opening in the 10 a.m. hour.
Yeah, oh, well, but we're not open.
Breakfast is-
Oh, yeah, except for
Believe breakfast
Monday and
is-
Sunday.
We're not open.
Yeah, so we have a limit. So the proposal basically says we want a certain, like, we want the proposer to say a certain number of days a week. Like, you know, a minimum number of days a week in your proposal, minimum number of hours per week as well. So we're not saying you have to be open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 6, and Monday 2 to 6, because I think we've looked at being aware that there may be periods of times where they're operating other sites in there. And so is this one of the multiple sites that they're operating in the community? And that was one of the options when we were looking at this request for proposal. So with that, there's a certain number of days per week, a certain number of hours per week, and seeing what works for the vendor as well for their proposal to come to us.
You said minimum, I think it would be more ideal if we looked at, as we can with our data, the hours when the library has the most people walking through the door.
Yeah.
And start with those hours, even if it's not 10 to 6. I'm just, you know, I haven't looked at the through the door data recently, but you know, we could say, well, certain hours of most days are the busiest ones. Let's start with those.
And I think, well, that's what I mean, it's like, we provide that, but we're not providing the staff for that. So we could provide we provide the information to them and say,
Yeah.
these are our busiest days of the week. These are our busiest timeframes. But it's up to you to find the staff to actually staff those and figure out, does that match the type of food you're willing to serve and sell? So that's information that we provide to the,
And even if they're here earlier than, you know, when it's quiet, they use that as prep time.
I don't believe the RFP was shared with the board, but, did it say whether, and it probably did, not having had a copy, I don't know what the answer is. Does the library receive a percentage of the gross that they sell? Or is there a set fee per hour, per day, or whatever that we get, whether they sell nothing or a ton of food?
and that was all part of, I think, in the proposal and the negotiated terms. And those were things working with the city attorney about what exactly the terms should be on there, and those are going to be possibly negotiated, and that's what we're working with Jana, which is that, is there a minimum cost, without going into too much, because I don't know if the person is not here on call, but it's, you know, for water, electrical, do you have a certain fee for some of these pieces of a minimum gross? Do you have a certain amount? And some of the vendors that were responded to us, some of them looked at numbers based on, well, it's gonna take us X amount of dollars to start up this for the first year, you know, or the first 6 months. So can we waive these fees? So we've got different proposals out there based on the different types of businesses calling it. So those are all pieces to negotiate with. That's why we're bringing in the property manager, because they're familiar with running a lot of those at our other city facilities as well.
And that's where potentially, if it's not a successful negotiation with the vendor, because they do have concerns, because they do operate other sites in Monterey, about it being something that's stretched too thin, if it was a minimum amount per month that they were required. So there is that ability for negotiation, that there is a minimum set and then a percentage of receipts.
Or knowing how it's gonna go.
Yes.
That's fair.
But there is a chosen vendor and negotiations are underway.
They're not underway because I will say that if you follow the news right now, the main property that has been under kind of continued negotiation on Fisherman's Wharf is Scales. And that has been under negotiation. That's been a priority. So right now what we're working with is with property management, where do we fit in basically in their queue with that. And so we want to work, and I don't want to work. I really don't want to push forward on any agreement without getting their buy-in and getting legal buy-in, because if we get into a longer contract and there's something that we miss out. And I could share the RFP with the board. It was up on our OpenGov website, and I'll share that out with the board after this, which is the procurement portal that the city uses for all procurement contracts. For not all procurement, but many of our procurement contracts go through OpenGov.
You mean share a link that we can use to look at it? You don't mean print hard copies of it?
I'll share, I think that because the site is, I don't know if you can still view it on OpenGov because it's under kind of a closed, you know, the timeline is closed. I'll either show you the link if you can view it that way, or I'll share an email PDF to the board so the board can see that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
Well, I guess we're commended for dressing up as a Grinch. And I think that there should be pictures of that somewhere.
Yeah, so we.
It was not in our packet, that's an omission.
Okay.
A lot of green paint.
We're moving on. Are there any, members of the public that want to make comments? No, okay. So the next item on the agenda is, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, question on the statistical report. We approved it and there's.
Yeah.
But it was kind of interesting. Suddenly we had a wireless usage of 0 minutes.
Yep.
And that must have been some glitch somewhere. I was just curious as to exactly.
Yeah, I'll give you guys some background, and we'll probably have to figure out how we do this in the future, is that because we've moved to a new system on this Juniper Wi-Fi network, we don't collect the data locally anymore. We used to collect it downstairs in the basement with everything. And now the usage is tracked by our ISD. So every month I've asked for them to provide a report, and we didn't get the report in time for this. So what I will say is the wireless sessions were 2,635 compared to 1,770 last December. But I don't have usage in minutes. And so I think that's where, what I think they've tracked right now is in terms of like terabytes, gigabytes, like upload and download. They're tracking more of that side of
So
what's
it's an apples to apples.
exactly. So we could still look at that. And I've asked the ISD for a monthly record for them to send that. So I'm not sure if that's something that they can auto generate, because that's, if they could just have that auto generate as like an Excel and just send it to us via email and then we have it. But that's where it's been.
Yeah.
And in the past, I think that was October was the first month, if I'm not mistaken, of 2024, when we shifted to Juniper on these online, and then we had a very similar problem at that point, which was just trying to get the data, the wireless sessions. But I told the ISD department, this is something we also report to the state library every year, and we need to have this information available.
So this is a fixed way we want to look at it. We can't shift to how they are.
I mean, the sessions, we want the number of sessions. I don't know if we need the minutes. I think because what I will say in the past, specifically on the way it's different right now, is that the sessions also are kind of different, because in the past, every 2 hours it booted you off. And now you can stay on all day long on the same session. So if you were here for 8 hours, you may have 4 sessions. Right now, each session is unique because you go in there and that's one person coming in and connecting to the network. So I think that's
So
more
people who
accurate.
are here all day, we'll see these numbers drop for some of our regular.
Yes, so I think, but because it makes it easier also to connect, I think that's where you're actually seeing the increase of this last month, is because that it was easier to connect. It's getting easier to connect to the system. So I think there might be a decrease on one side, an increase in the other. But then also, so I don't know, in the future, we may just not be able to provide the wireless usage in minutes, just because we don't get that same data point that we did in the past.
And so you may just take it off of the report or put an asterisk and say on the old one or something like that.
Exactly.
Which is more accurate. You don't want it to add into your percentages. Or
Right.
like you had a giant drop in
Nothing.
and anything.
Exactly.
I wanted to back up to the revenue balances just for the curiosity, but if we could, under library trust fund, the reference services. We had the budget and amended budget of 54,000 and have only spent $4,000. Is that, it's something that is. Dips or,
This is, a lot of this is the trust fund is a collections budget too. And that's for people on this packet page 17 under 5530 reference services. And yes, so right now we're spending majority of our collection budget out of general fund before we go into the trust fund. And as we go forward,
okay, so that would ramp up in the second half of our fiscal year.
right, as we have other needs, and talking with, Kim, we were talking about ebooks and some of the other services that were in there. Oh, I'm sorry, this is revenue. I'm sorry, I was thinking expenditure. I'm sorry, revenue. Revenue, this is kind of like adopted, so this is technically grants. Oh, sorry, I thought you were talking expenditures, so never mind. Let me back that up. So this would be, if this is revenue, this would be potential revenue coming in for different grants and services. So I think 4,327. With just looking at this, I believe that would be zip books. So that would be the amount that we got for the zip books grant recently. And so if we have other grants coming in, that's where those pieces would be going into.
Okay, but we would want to be careful not to extend ourselves or expect over $50,000 if we weren't going to get near that, right?
Right. I mean, that's where like we budget in the beginning of the year based on prior,
Expectation. Oh,
you know,
okay,
you know,
yeah,
prior other years that we've gotten other grants out there. So if you were coming in for MC Gibbs and other kind of pieces like that, where those ones we haven't hit yet. We haven't hit yet.
oh, and that's That's gonna make that right up.
Right, and so
Okay.
it's gonna be close to $60,000.
Right, yes,
So that's why some of the numbers just are.
okay, so annualized, we get there. Okay.
Sorry about the confusion right there. I was thinking expenditures. My
Yeah,
apologies.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So now we're moving into the, library director report on facility needs.
All right. Oh, that's me. All right. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I would just wanted to go forward with, in terms of fiscal implications, there's quite a range in need for the building, going from the low end of some of the smaller, facility changes we've done, for example, here in community room and some of the other spaces around the library. The city is, changing over many of the halogen light bulbs into LEDs. So some of the lighting throughout the nonfiction, fiction area is actually getting better, as you may see, as they're going through and replacing a lot one by one. But it ranges all the way up to, our group four report, which is $40 million, for a high end. So there's quite a bit of need right there. And the city has set aside, you may see in the budget, $250,000 annually. First time last year, but this year again, it may be that we'll see about for facility reserves for the library. But that doesn't really cover all of the main needs coming up here. So on here, there's a number of items that are at the kind of need that I see right now. I haven't seen the latest. We had a facility condition analysis kind of working on. I walked through with the contractor and city public works a couple of months ago, but I haven't seen the final report yet. But so some of these are items that I'm currently aware of, and I think there are immediate needs here that I think that we should come up with a plan for how do we advocate for this. And I've talked with different some of our folks about this in the past as well. So part of this, as I mentioned, the LED fixtures as lighting goes out, like above areas, but there's the big areas in like the main area of the library. Also ceiling tiles, we have those glue-on ceiling tiles on there. The 2007 facility assessment says the restroom should be updated for compliance, for various levels of compliance on there. And they haven't been updated since the 1980s, pre-ADA Act. Air circulation and package units. So when I was walking through the facility with our contractor, a lot of the package units are actually sitting in the attic space. If you walk up into the attic space, they're basically built, the roof is built around them. And so they are extremely hard to replace, but that's where all of our air circulation comes in here. If we were to have upgrade those units, it'd be quite expensive to do, but I feel like those are quite dated as well as dirty and you can't provide the latest, like what they call MERV, mechanical, rating of the filter ratings that you have on facilities for higher filter ratings. You can't put those in older heating and cooling units in a facility. The windows throughout the building are single pane. They have poor insulation and UV protection. The Archives 2 for the California History Room is located in the server room in the basement. The server room creates heat. And we do have, it's right outside where the Friends of the Library are downstairs, but that basement room, there's not good air circulation in there too. And we have a number of thousands of photos and documents and maps all sitting in this space that's in the basement. And that's where you see items where it's Archives 2. And there's a decreased lifespan because we consistently have issues where all of a sudden it's pumping in heat and we don't have ways to move out all of the other materials. So we need basically like a dedicated HVAC unit for that space so that you can, in the cold months, you can have heat. And the hot months you can have cold, you can also have a dehumidifier in there. The electrical in the building it ranges from 1956 to 1983 with a number of older electrical panels. We do have screw and fuse panels at some of the panels upstairs. And the wiring is aging as well as the data cable that we use here is Cat5e throughout the building. So looking at what comes into the building, and I know a lot of places are moving towards network spots. So maybe you don't have to have Cat5e, you don't have to have like Cat6e or whatever it is now up to every single spot, but you do have to have it up to your wireless points because our wireless access points can't operate at the highest speed because of the cabling that is in here in the building. And exterior of the building is in need of painting. The gutters consistently leak. The public works was out here recently. You can actually see drip marks all around the building, even on days when it's not raining. So they've consistently gone up every 6 months trying to fix that. And the rear patio could also be used to be upgraded for a nice covered arbor or terrace for outdoor seating and program area out there. Kind of just the walkway and right behind us. And terrace garden on the second floor is not accessible due to OSHA guidelines, so we cannot update that garden area in there because of we need to be tethered in to manage the garden. And elevator is aged, I believe it's undersized based on ADA work that we've seen. And the dumbwaiter consistently has problems, been out for what, almost 2 months, month and a half now. And so those kind of pieces where the dumbwaiter brings up the books to the second floor down in the basement. And just to mention that there were 2 projects brought forward to NCIP. Last year, they missed the cutoff. And there were a couple commissioners marking them as a 0, 1, or a 2. But I feel that by getting a champion on this, from the board or, and friends and others, that we could really advocate for a needed project as one space. And then also, I will just say that there was another meeting in December that the council had decided, or staff had brought to council about ADA plan, and 2 sites had been identified as possible for funding for this kind of fiscal year. And that would, this upcoming fiscal year, and that would be the sports center and the library for funding for ADA improvements. But I don't know exactly how much, and I don't know what the priorities are. But we do know that there is an ADA report out there about the facility needs for the library in the nature of close to $500,000. So there are identified amounts there too. I just don't know how much is on that plate. So that is something we have to see as the budget progresses, what's going to be on there. But I guess those are some of just the higher level kind of, without going through item by item on there. I think that we have some needs that to me are immediate in the immediate need versus a brand new or a fully renovated building, and that we could look at this. And I will also state that Pacific Grove was able to do a number of really beautiful upgrades to their library based on, the community work that happened between the different folks involved there. And that Harrison Memorial Carmel is currently going through a process with their main library there about pushing for upgrades to the historic buildings that they have there. So we've in alignment about just making upgrades to this building.
About the $250,000 that is set aside. What are the terms of our access to that? And how do we determine priorities for, this is a huge list and most of the things are pretty important. The fire suppression system, the restrooms, all these things are very old and have been noted in the past at work. And it does seem like the city should provide a lot of this, but apparently they haven't. So, yeah.
I can follow with, there's a couple of things where we have every year, there's a capital improvement project fund, which is a few $1 million. That is citywide. So we submit projects It's called Form B, I believe it's called, through the city. And that the city public works, and I don't sit in those meetings, so I don't know if you work with city manager or finance director and identify how much is on there, so I'm not sure the background for that. But I do know I submitted a couple projects every year for like what things we would like to see, whether that's painting on the outside, fixing the terrace, fixing the lighting. And lighting was approved through Form B, and that is how that funding is going to, that's capital project. So that is being done by Public Works under their capital projects funding.
Okay.
As for the 250,000, I believe my understanding is that would be through city manager and finance director approval. I do not have direct access to that funds, and the board does not either, because it's not a trust fund, it's a special fund. And I think that for what I assume, and I see it's kind of like let's say something were to happen here in the building and we don't have a fund set aside to really make that emergency repair or anything like that. This gives us at least some cushion if there were something to happen here, that there's a cost for example, one of my libraries before we got heavy rain, the gutters were not cleared, and my community room, the entire roof collapsed. And the kind of thing like that, of like replacing a roof, costs quite a bit of money at that time. And so that would be something that I think working with finance director and city manager about, an immediate need for that. And that's where I think some of that $250,000, because $250,000 does not go a long way for any kind of project of this scope and scale. And that the capital project with just a couple $1 million is not, for citywide, there's not enough for just the library.
Right. So we have just what we are able to do, or, this group would go about prioritizing and, making recommendations or requests based on cost and.
I would back up. Shed a comment.
Okay.
Question, yes, please.
I have something to report here. I became acquainted with a representative of the council. First when she came to campaign, and then later on at the Marriott and so on. I've stayed in touch. And we got together and she mentioned that she had been the past president of the neighborhood program, and that she could help us if there was a champion, somebody wanted to be the one. And it's a public relations campaign, and it's not just going up. And she asked if I would like to do that. So I'm volunteering. And what we take is a coordinated effort. So this is more like an outreach. Where you have to sell this thing to the citizens. We have to go and plead our case to the various places. So if you're willing, I'd like to do that. And we'll get organized, and I'll send you the details.
But wouldn't we also, sorry.
Go ahead.
Wouldn't we also agree among ourselves what we feel to be city responsibilities and fundraising priorities? And, we can categorize a lot of this as basic maintenance versus improvement. And we may not get our way, but we could have a point of view on what this group thinks is appropriate.
That would be a separate topic then. This is to get the funding for the things that we say we need.
But they're totally connected.
And
If
there's
it's
so
the funding,
many.
it's okay, no, it's-
Oh, yeah.
It'd be different if there
And those
were
are priorities. I agree.
So just to piggyback on that, I feel kind of the same way. So we need to know what it is that the city is gonna try to find at the city. So maybe the board leadership should meet with you and Hans and Nat and say, and try to figure out which ones they figure they're gonna support. Also need to prioritize this list. You're probably the best person to know which ones. I mean, we can all talk about it, but you're the one who lives here. You're the one who operates this library, and so you can advise us which one is priority. I also think that, in order to go out and do the things we need to do, once we know what it is that we're trying to advocate for, we need two things. One is a list of talking points or a dog and pony show. You know, we can put together a PowerPoint or something, or a list of bullets. And then we need people to commit. I'll go to this neighborhood association,
Right.
you go to that neighborhood association.
Exactly.
We can work with the friends. And, you know, we can have a board member and a friend and whatever, do that. We should.
You're speaking my mind.
Yeah, but when you contact, you know, when we contact, at the point when we contact the NCIP person, for example, we need to know what we want to ask for.
Yeah, I
We can't
think
just say,
that's why the
we want
details-
you to support the library. We have to say,
I saw.
this is why you need it, this is what we have, and this is, and these are the things that we
Yeah.
need to ask for. So we gotta have our act together,
Uh-huh.
we gotta have our ducks in a row before we move forward. Yes, but I think, and that's what the advocacy committee was kind of formed to do. To figure that out, to work with the friends and the board. And, you know, when I spoke to our NCIP rep, she said, come to the meetings and advocate. That's how you get your projects funded. You guys didn't come, all these other people came, and the people listened to them, and they funded theirs, and they didn't fund yours. So, yeah, there we
There's
are.
also a lot
We
of
have a roadmap.
politics between like the NCIP members.
So I'll be in touch with everybody
Okay,
and, we'll go from there.
so Bob, Heather,
I can't feel any more frustrated, because this is not a new story. And, I agree 100% with the statement or implication from some of my fellow trustees that, these things are city responsibilities. And as I look at this list, and I would hazard a guess, having experience here, that this is not a complete list, but maybe the main priorities that Brian has put for us on today's agenda. Every single one of those is essential. Not one of them is a luxury item or an extra or something just to make the library nicer. Every single one of these is essential. And some of them, I'm wondering if they're not legally essential. Like the ones in particular that relate to ADA compliance. But even aside from that, not one of these isn't essential in terms of effective management of a physical space. So you're talking, you say, well, maybe the gutters haven't leaked yet, so we haven't had a roof fall in like that library where Brian was before, so we don't have to do anything about it. I mean, having gutters there that might cause that should be fixed. And, you know, effective management of this building, I think has been, say, not a priority, is putting it mildly, for a long time. And there were some years when there were a lot of priorities across the city because the budget was down. That couldn't be, but the city's income has bounced back. And I think that a lot of these things not only have been mentioned to the city council and to the city management before, as a result of board discussion and report writing, but also as a result of the expenditure of tens of thousands of dollars to consultants who looked at the place and gave us results of their research and suggestions depending on, you know, how much we wanted to do, all the way from fixing things in this building to demolishing this building and building a new one somewhere. So none of this is new. And yet we still have things that, at least in my opinion, are absolutely essential, not extras. You know, if you had a carpet somewhere and it was perfectly functional, but you didn't like the color and you wanted to change it. Well, if you had the money, you might do it, and that would be something extra, not really needed, but I don't see any of these that aren't needed. Therefore, I don't see any of these that shouldn't be in a city budget from the get-go. If I understood Brian's clarification about the $250,000 set aside for library reserves, it's kind of like an emergency fund. You get to use it to fix things that are broken. You know, like a roof that fell in because the gutters didn't work and they let water through. So it's not really money, it's money that won't get spent unless something happens. And if nothing happens like that, then, you know, the money will just stay wherever it is or roll over into somebody else's pocket, or I don't know what will happen to it. But the important point is that it won't go automatically, it won't automatically be spent on library needs. It's, like I say, it's more of like an insurance policy. You have it, and you hope you don't have to use it because you don't want to have an emergency. So, but these things that I'm looking at on our agenda tonight have been there, many of them for a long time, and the dates in some of those are just embarrassing, frankly. And this is a public meeting. Anybody in the public could be listening in and hearing that the electrical in the building hasn't been, well, ranges from 1956 to 1983. Now, quick doing my math, that makes it over 40 years old at a minimum. So let me take off my trustee hat and pretend I'm a resident of a neighborhood and somebody from the library board or staff or whatever comes to a neighborhood meeting, right? And says, hey, the library needs X, Y, Z, so we need funding. For somebody to say, well, you gotta go out and get grants. I'm gonna sit there and say, well, yeah, isn't that something the city does for all their buildings, the maintenance of it? And improving isn't the same as maintenance. Maintenance is maintenance. If you maintain your weight, it stays about the same. If you improve your weight, in my case, it would go down. So, I mean, it implies a change for the better when you talk about improvement. So these aren't improvements in my mind. These are things that are long overdue maintenance. And you can't pick one, I don't think, that would not be seen in the same way. So I really, if we're not getting the money from the city for something that is as essential as the city library, and we can go around talking about, well, should we demolish it and build a new one? Should we try to get the public to donate even more money to cover some of these things? And like Brian said, a lot of these things are pretty expensive. And even if we took every penny from the largest fundraiser we have in the entire year, which I believe is Monterey County Gives, because we get over $60,000. That's gonna be, maybe not a drop, it might be a measuring cup in the bucket to cover these things. And we get to the point of asking, well, whose responsibility is it? Who would pay for it if the gutters in City Hall were leaking and they were worrying about the roof in City Hall collapsing? Who would pay for that? Would we go out and try to get extra money donated from the city residents to cover new gutters for the City Hall building? And I don't see this as any different from that. So, like I say, it's very frustrating because many of these things have been brought before the city management, city council before, and now we're still reading about them. So that's more of a experienced personal assessment of what we're talking about, and I'm just not sure what would be effective. If we really think we can get in NCIP to cover anything, then a different approach to approaching them. But that's not gonna cover all this by any stretch.
The other concern I have there is like MC Gives is, they
It's a
want.
project.
Yeah, they want your
You have to
project
use
to
it for the
be
project.
No, I was just using that dollar figure as an example. I wasn't saying MC
They don't
kids should
want-
be,
They don't wanna buy it.
You said what we were gonna do with it.
Right, they want it to be enriching programming and.
yeah, no, I wasn't suggesting that we say, hey, MC give us money for a new roof.
No,
I
no,
was
no,
saying,
I'm trying to
Just
point
using
out
that dollar
that
In
it
fact,
is,
in fact,
and
they're
it's,
not allowed to do that.
Right.
Yeah. And also in CIP, I don't know that much about it, but I have the feeling that they don't want people coming around for things that should be basic maintenance either.
Right, but if you look at the sports center, for example, a lot of the whole construction of the entire sports center is
Okay,
funded
so
by
basic,
NCIP money.
basic things.
Yeah,
Okay.
but. You know, so, and Bob, I think you're preaching to the choir here.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right, but, right? It's not happening, so then what?
So I would just point out that I think, from hearing from the board, that I think an accurate list, I think that accurate list for the discussion points also and going to community, whoever that's going together, but I will state and I could be off on this, but the number 5 ranked item that was, I thought this was approved, number 5 and number 6 for this year's NCIP. Number 5 was Hilltop Park Center renovation with a $1 million cost, and that was out of a total of 150 possible points at 139 out of 150. And then item number 6 was fire station 12 and 13 rehabilitation. So 2 fire stations that needed upgrades and rehabilitation based on being aging facilities. That was ranked number 6 and also 139 out of 150 with a cost of 2.2 million. And I think last year there was an increase based on a single year of additional revenues coming in. But I think because ours, it's like if this was something that advocacy and the board and different folks would be willing to kind of champion and go forward, we just need to figure out what's the messaging, what's the actual need, and what are we going to get out of this? Because all of those, projects on there, I think it could be very clearly stated. This is what the funding gets you for your library and the renovation. And I do think there are people on there that are supportive of it and that will say, I think the thing is that NCIP, just like other committees, it's a committee of people community members, love their community, want to be active in there and see things done. And different projects have been funded here at the library through NCIP in the past too. So there's multiple projects that have been funded here over time. And so it'd just be a good thing. What's that?
But we need to show.
People need to show up and have the conversations in the community groups, in neighborhood
Yes.
groups, in NCIP meetings. And I will just say, I don't know the timeline because they have another meeting. They are starting to meet here as a group, rather than in council chambers. So they're another group that's meeting inside of here. But they haven't scheduled their time frame for when project applications are due and other things like that. So it gives us time, but I wanted to see basically my take on this is that because there's that big lofty goal, which is a new, revised building or a new building from, the group 4 report, the plan that came before I started here. But I don't, personally at this time, I don't see the avenue. I don't see the roadway to get to that point. Where I think that there is immediate needs, and looking back, I've seen a number of facility reports going past the past 40 years of this library. Like every 10 years, the library board at that point going back and saying, well, what can we do to update this building? What can we do? And I feel like if we were to just go through and get some actionable items on sites that the community will recognize when you upgrade the restrooms. The community is gonna notice when you paint and do the exterior, do some of these other things. That's where I feel like having a couple folks on board that we could be really successful on.
So Reach,
Yes.
the arrangement you're talking about with the former NCIP person, is she still on NCIP and is she
She's not
suggesting?
there, but she's on the president.
Okay,
She's
but
just
she's
there.
suggesting that we
go to NCRP?
Not
Or
all of us at once.
Yeah,
So that's what she's talking to me about. Is we need to have a campaign, a coordination of having a few people show up every meeting.
Exactly.
You know, so we pick, say, okay, Dan will go this time, I'll go next time, et cetera, et cetera. Also, people from our Friends and Foundation. And each time bring up one or two topics. You don't want to.
I think
Have
you
a
need to go with a
6-minute
consistent message.
right.
I think we
You don't want
go,
to go on talking, they're talking here. You want to have a short thing that you get 3 minutes. Everybody gets 3 minutes to speak. You have to have a condensed message in that. So that's why we need to organize this. That's why I'm trying to get this where we say, okay, Brian, tell us what the things are, and then who is going there, here are the 2 points that we need to bring up. The idea is to keep us visible. If somebody is there every time saying, oh, we need this, oh, we need that, we're not forgotten. And we're not, you know, making them wish that we shut up. Just short message, not
and I think not only NCRP, but also the neighborhood association.
constable, everything.
Ryan, is there a directory of neighborhood associations that you're?
Oh, yeah, well, there's a website.
There's a,
For each of them?
yeah, so there's 2 different, you have a neighborhood association.
Right.
And then you have NCIP, which are not directly connected.
Right, and I think we need to work with both, because they
Yeah.
are different.
Yeah, and so the city has, I believe, kind of, they have their map and list, but they're not. Let's see, I know some of them do the here, there's a contact list on the website. And then, so the contact list on the website for there, and you'll see for neighborhood groups.
And in fairness about this list, I think, because it is embarrassing that it's piled up like this, but as you say, there was talk of, you know, feasibility study and maybe we would move and build something new. And so a lot of these did get kicked down the road on hold, wondering if we would go a different path. And so it isn't, they have just continued to get older and older, but in all fairness, we sort of set on the fence ourselves on which way to either take care of the building or fundraise to build.
Yeah, and not knowing their background from a lot of the other ones, because I've just been going through and cleaning my office, of course, and so it's like you go through, you find stuff from 25 years ago and different models that came out there, and I think that's what a lot of times is that the models and the consultant comes out, and we get the funding for a consultant and a model for what happens there, but then when it boots to the ground, I need a cost for the shovel, you know, I need some funding for that piece. That's the really more the difficult kind of side, right? And so there are models from years back of like, how would you remodel this library and space? And that's happened there, I think, a couple times. Group 4 was just the latest version of that. And it goes into, but as you see with construction projects and costs, they only go up every few years. It's just like the cost of construction materials just keeps going up and up and up.
But most of those plans, and I think the group 4s built additional space, you still need the bathrooms upgraded. Right? So you still need the HVAC, you still need the.
Is it not the case that failure to maintain one or more of these items on this list, if not on another longer list, in a public space such as the library, is something that could make, in this case, the city vulnerable to a lawsuit?
Well, no, I
There
think
must be regulations for public spaces that require, you know, different, quality functions and, safety measures and things like that.
so. I think what you'll find is accessibility access is that once you start doing renovations on your building, once you start doing upgrades and doing construction, you trigger changes, you trigger current codes and different things like that. So, if you have it, I'm not a building inspector by any means, but I mean, if somebody comes in here and we do a fire inspection and we do certain inspections annually and they go through and they make sure, okay, you have lights, the correct kind of lights on here, and you have the pushes and the doors go through, and you have those basic safety and life functions go through on that side. And so you have to make sure that that level of safety is there. But I will say, upgrades, like if you were to do, when we start upgrading the sidewalk on Pacific Street, that immediately triggers, okay, you've got to do other work to make that sidewalk accessible because you started to break it in, because you started to break into the concrete, right? And that's what triggers a lot of that stuff. So if you started doing work on electrical, you have to make it all up to code currently, right? So you have to do that. So that means that like, it wouldn't be something like, in my mind, if we're just, I'm looking at electrical as a whole, because I don't want to say, hey, you replace the panel, because then you open up the panel and you start looking at all the wires and everything connected to it, then needs to be upgraded to make it life safety updated. And I'll say the city has a number of older buildings, like for across the street, the public safety building is another one, which is just a couple of years newer than here, but that the same thing, they have restroom problems, they have a lot of the same problems, because that's still also early mid-50s across the street. So it's pretty common, and I mean, like Carmel has the historic library from the 1920s, so there's some people that like the charm of old buildings on that side. But same thing, once you start breaking in and doing construction and architecture on that work, you have to bring it up to current standards. So that's a long way of saying that I wouldn't know if there's any kind of, health and safety kind of issues currently at this site on that thing, but it's like, when we do the inspection, the fire extinguisher, fire suppression system, inspections, all of those things is that they're currently working and we are going through getting inspected. But for life cycle, I think it's a good practice for us to go through and say, typical length of fire suppression is around that length, let's get these upgraded. Typical length of time for electrical is this amount of time, let's get this upgraded because so many people come in and out of this building.
So if we want to go out of here with some sort of plan, we need to figure out steps forward, because we can talk about this and then adjourn, and then we come back next week and guess what? And we can all agree to go to our NCRP meetings, but unless we have the message, the message is support the library, but that's not enough, I think. I think we need to be more specific, and we need a sheet, if it's just bullets. The library hasn't been upgraded since 1953. The wiring is bad. That, we've got these problems, and
Martha, Jean's gonna guide you through the process. It's Jean. So, I know you're saying all these things.
Yeah, no,
They will come in.
but they need to be driven by us.
Yeah, but she doesn't know
We
what we
can't
need.
ask her what the library needs.
No,
So we need to do our
I
part,
know,
and then the process
yes.
is fine. But
Right.
Yeah,
right?
that's the part that Marcia's
We
talking
need to, we need both. We need both.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. So,
I was aware of that.
So, we need,
In a different way, that's just repeating what we've done over many years, Marcia. This board, through the use of consultants and many discussions, and you and I were the two reps to the last one, something four, was it?
and G4 knows you and Jim Thompson.
Oh, okay, well, at any rate, this board has gone through the process one way or another of coming up with something to present to city management and the city council showing need. And, I guess we could keep trying and try other things, but, when, And unless we're gonna change what I think was a pretty strong consensus here tonight, our opinion that the city ought to be more supportive of just maintaining, not necessarily improving, just maintaining things at the library in terms of the physical plant of the library.
But we have to be realistic in knowing that we're not going to get all this done by the city. And we're gonna need a multi-pronged approach, and that's going to include Friends and Foundation, major donors,
I think the
NCDS.
city considers NCIP as part of the city budget.
Right.
So that, I mean, that's their thinking, you know, we may not agree, but that their thinking is, oh, this part
Take
of
it to
city
them.
money and that part of city money, because the NCIP money is city revenue, so.
Well, NCIP is citywide, so even if they approved of some of the requests pertaining to the library, it'll be way insufficient. And it'll be nice to have, and it'll make some nice improvements and things that come out of NCIP that have helped the library in the past. I was on NCIP. But like it says here, in our agenda item, it says getting, advocacy plan may include future NCIP projects proposal and money from NCIP. So, I mean, it's gotta come from somewhere. And, the people in NCIP are just representing each of their neighborhoods. And if somebody in a neighborhood says, we need a sign at the entrance to our neighborhood that tells the public that they are going into XYZ neighborhood, that's gonna get funded. And it has in the past. I'm struggling with being creative and finding other ways of getting support from where I think it should come.
And so I understand that, but if you go to the city and say you should fund this, and they say, oh yeah, we'll eventually fund this. Meeting over,
We're right back where we.
and it doesn't get funded. What are you gonna do? Put a gun to their head? I mean, if they're not gonna fund it,
Right,
we
we
need
get
to
these things done,
figure
another
out a
way
way.
or anyway.
I think the council has some impact on
City council.
what the city does. And well, we have one council person on our side supposedly, and there is a new element to the council. There are, I think, three of them are,
So that can
are
be part
new.
of our campaign, so.
And,
France,
yeah, it was, I think it was
We can talk
helpful
about this
when
here.
Marcia made the,
Yeah,
say
well,
the
that
library.
time, we had an ask, and
And
we
we
got
could
what we asked for. We
Yes.
asked for more personnel and
So-
more hours, and we got it. So now,
Our
We
needs
need
are,
to
are
ask
many.
Brian to
I mean,
give
we are
us-
still not funded for enough hours, for enough staff, all this kind of thing, but.
But to
this-
approach these, don't you think that maybe we make a priority list based on the load, the cost, but also the urgency, and decide what we're gonna go after, and then we can assign it to the source we think will be most amenable to the ask.
and I think the city council is fine, but again, we need to have a message.
Yeah,
We
right.
can't just go in and say, here's a big list.
Yeah,
right.
this stuff.
Right, I think we just, we have to put a message together, and, I think the board will be happy to go and talk to them, even if we just do the 3 minutes in the beginning of the city council meeting, present a 3-minute thing. So I think city council is good, I think the NCIP is good, and the neighborhood association.
yes,
Because, yes, the library is only in, the Old Town neighborhood, but we only have one library. And it's everybody's library, just like the sports center is everybody's sports center, even though it may not be in the neighborhood. And a lot of the things that have been funded in the past were funded with NCIP money. I mean, for example, this year they did rec trail upgrades. And the rec trail isn't in everybody's neighborhood.
Well, and we haven't gotten there yet, but on the activity report that Kim's going to give us, there was that the bookmobile is going once a month to farmer's market.
Well, there was a appearance at the farmer's market.
Oh, and that-
It wasn't added to the schedule.
Oh, that won't be, okay, because I was gonna ask if maybe advocacy representatives, either from here or from the Friends or somewhere, could take part in that, if that happens again, just be there to talk about our needs and how people in the community could get involved.
Brian, on here, you also do mention, besides NCIP, you say public or private grants for state funding. Now, realistically, how much, I mean, you apply for a lot of grants when they're available, but what do you think about the possibility of the private funding or the state funding?
Yeah, so I mean, we're still looking at things from like the California State Library, which have a building forward grant. I don't know how many of those. From what I heard from the state library, there were the state budget was pretty unknown for quite some time for library costs. And so there was a period of time where they had, a couple $100 million allocated for building forward, and they did apply for that, and we did not get it based on our income per capita. But a number of municipalities, I think we're gonna have that money pulled if they did not actually spend it in time. If they didn't have any contract by time, because the state was basically saying, trying to cover their budget. And they were, hundreds of millions of dollars behind, and so they said, we're gonna pull this back. And so I don't know if they're gonna come back like, with the state budget going up and down. Every few years, that's always a possibility for the state to come back and say, we wanna come back. Cause they asked some of these communities, I don't know how many of those that they allocated funding and then they just pulled it back and they don't actually have funding for it, they might come back for it. That'll be the state side. The state other side is appropriations from state senators, state, basically state assembly members, where they have projects in their district that they can set aside. And I know those have gone through different spots in the state for different projects for libraries, recreation, different facilities like that. And I was saying like public grants, private public grants, because I think one of the things that I often hear is, well, when there's electrical or lighting, you can just apply for a grant from PG&E. And I'm like, well, tell me when those open up, because I haven't seen them in several years. So it's like, we're constantly just have to look for when these come out. We're not sure how, if there's any change to federal funding to IMLS, which then affects how the state library gets grants and how the state library gets funded. So some of those pieces of how funding nationally can affect state, or it can affect regional, and what kind of grants are available. So as we see these things kind of pop open, I think sometimes there are possibilities for, whether that's solar and battery backup and some emergency things like that. Those possibly come up. So I think that's where I'm thinking it's possible where you can look at some of these things. But by no means do we have something actionable at this time where I see a grant that's out there that's available for us.
I think that the same thing that Bob said before can be applied to the state that might say, well, these are things that your city should take care of, not us. So, so everybody's going like this.
I hate to say we're done with, this is item 6, I think, but I think part of item 7 relates directly to this, and there's a typo. It says department budget proposals for fiscal year 25-26 are due on Friday, April 4th, 2024. I think it should say Friday, April 4th, 2025. Before which we will have 2 board meetings.
Yeah.
So I am wondering in my brain, if by our next meeting, with plenty of time to, individually read and digest and understand and do any research that we want to do on our own, could, have a more lengthy list of things that we might think are essential, not just, extras that we would, seek funding for. And, then no later than our meeting in March, which still precedes the, deadline here of April 4th, we come up with the, recommendations requested in this portion of our item 7 tonight. And, not hesitate to list as part of the library's budget request things like we've been discussing from item 6. And let the city council or somebody say, no, you can't have an elevator that meets standards. And see what happens. I mean, put the responsibility where it belongs in my mind.
But typically, that's not, what I would say is that's typically not in the budget of the library, that's typically in the budget of capital projects for public works, so that it's on. And
I don't care where they put it, I'm just
I
saying that,
do,
but we have to express, no, but we have to express the need apparently. We're talking about going all over the city, expressing the need to, other constituents in the city, right? And ultimately, it has to get in front of those people that make the decisions. And if they say, yeah, the library needs this, and we're gonna put that in a public works budget, fine.
so I'll say, I mean, because here's what happens with in terms of our annual budget, and then that's where it fits into, I see what you're saying about, like, whether it goes to budget study session with the council. And I'm just saying on the budget narrative, or if we're looking at April 4th, where I'm looking at the budget proposal, those typically are not being, we've put forward a project of what projects we want for capital projects through Form B, which is limited for the city, and I'm not in that room in that discussion. Every department is out there saying, these are different projects that we need for our city. We put those forward, and those have already been completed at the end of December. But for things like this, like, we have funding local income per capita. If we're looking at the projects for the state budget, and they are basically saying you're eligible for grants based on your budget for this fiscal year, and you put in $1 million, that looks like you're spending a lot more income per capita on, or it costs your library more to run, is what I like, because if, for example, if you were to say, we're gonna spend $20 million on a capital project, now your budget goes from $3 million a year to $23 million a year for that, and your per resident fee and per resident cost for you to provide library services skyrockets in a comparison of other things throughout the state. That's just where I think, like, that budget, for me, it makes more sense for that to be in a capital projects budget and a capital public works, and then the advocacy part goes into going to council, going to other folks and saying, like, we don't care where the money is at in the budget, like on the line, but we need $750,000 for accessible, a new elevator shaft and new dumbwaiter.
Not in your budget, but in the city's capital.
Yeah.
project.
And I'm just
That's what
saying,
you really.
that's where I'm thinking, like, and I could be off on there, but I'm just thinking, like, typically when they have funding going through on a lot of those things, they're putting those not in the operating costs and budget for it, because I just don't want to throw off the annual
Metrics.
and the metrics on our side.
So, does the city know about this list?
I mean,
Together, I mean, do they have this list?
they may have, I mean, they may have, there's a number of lists like in their facility needs.
I mean, are most of these things already, are they aware of them?
So I mean, when we looked at building forward, when that grant was open for kind of, looking at electrical and, operating up to there. And
You put pieces of this.
I put pieces of that in there, so they're aware that, yes, there are needs for it. And I think that, as Hans is talked about consistently is the age of infrastructure through the city. You know, and that's been one of his messages, and also to our kind of our city staff, is that there's a number of facilities which are aging out there. There's a lot of things which are nice to have, but what do you need to have? There's, you know, what's nice to build, but also what do you actually, you need to focus on what you have. So I think Hans is well aware that there's a lot of aging infrastructure throughout the city out there, and that there needs to be a reinvestment of funds on what you currently have to operate.
And it's always good to rotate those sorts of projects because they'll always happen and you can't just do them all in 1 year. So all of these things, but citywide, but here in-house, this list, it wouldn't be your best move to do it all at once. Because in 40 years, you'll have to do it all at once again and it's gonna hurt. And these things should be done.
And 5 years cycle.
Right, yeah. So I think we need to prioritize and choose the ones that are the most urgent. And focus on them, because I think we all know, even if we went to every source of funding we can think of, we're not gonna get everything we want.
Right. And I'll say also, just in the discussion, are you guys good, because we started going on into page 23, 24, did we want to talk on that one right now? Did you look at the calendar, are we good on 20, on the last one?
Well, so we need a plan, we need, and some sort of idea of the cost of the, well, we need priorities out of this big list, what really do we need immediately, and then
And
what's the
which
cost,
ones
what's
do
the
we got
cost
in
range,
CIP?
and
Right, I think we can
and who
assign,
should we? How should we approach, should we?
who are we hoping will
Yes,
help
yes,
us for
yes,
each of
yes.
them.
So I guess if in fact you had 5 years, you know, where somebody said we're gonna do these over 5 years, which ones would you put? Number one, you know, immediately, which one next year, which one that year, maybe that's a good way to think about it, since they're all priority one. in our
Yeah,
minds.
right.
You know, like the, you know, the terrace garden might not be as important as the restrooms and the.
Right.
And the HVAC.
And we talked in the advocacy group about, for NCIP, it's good to have something that, you know, sounds great, sexy. I mean, all these are very basic things that don't necessarily make everybody say, oh, yeah, you should do that. So,
Well, none of these things are.
No.
Sexy,
Right.
no, no,
I
but
think it's because there should be part of routine maintenance.
yes,
of the
they
building.
are. It should.
And I think, if we're gonna approach NCIP, we need to get a feel for how much will NCIP cover? And ask for projects that are within what we think their limit would be. I mean, if we say, well, we need this done and it's gonna cost $300,000. NCIP, if I were an NCIP voter, I'd say, well, forget that, we can't afford
You know, we can do 6 projects for that amount and make
it.
6
Yeah, so
people
we
happy.
need to be strategic with what we, just like you do with grants.
Right.
You have to be strategic with what you ask of in a proposal, whether it's state or private or whatever. And if you're asking for the universe, maybe they'll only give you the moon.
Right, so the one about the archives, I'm looking at the history room archives. So it's in the basement, so if you were gonna ask somebody to fix that, what would you ask for? A new room to put them in, or?
So I mean, with that, you would potentially, you would move the tower, which I mean with the IT tower, all IT equipment is consistently shrinking down in terms of what's there. And because you need new network cabling, you know, so you have to look at it as a package, right? So you're like, if you're installing new network cabling throughout the building, you start with a new site for the network cabling with a new locked spot for that. Move
Separated
that,
from the
sep-
artifacts.
separate that completely out. And that the HVAC ventilation would be direct for that room. So you can have a direct run of that, which is possibility. So it's two components. One is that you could keep it technically in there, but then you just add a specific package unit which goes inside the room, controlling the HVAC in there. But the other stuff, which is the variable, which is the, all of the server equipment goes out as you upgrade server equipment, electrical and network capability throughout. So,
Well, the reason I'm mentioning that one in particular is because people might be interested in
Yeah.
using the history room and the archives, and then the extra benefit might be that the books that are stored down there wouldn't get something big with it. Pretty nice. But anyway, so some way to package that so it looks sexy enough that you can sell that and get the wiring and everything in there for NCRT.
Right, that and the patio and the terrace are the ones that might be attractive to donors or a fundraising project. Where, as Bob says, gutters should just be taken care of by.
But maybe the patio could include the gutters.
Right.
Stick them in there somehow, so that, something doesn't collapse and then it cost them $1 million to fix.
Or can a portion of it get from MC gives, I think it's for like the district, right? So could that be?
yes,
It's
part of my,
over there.
depending on how much we raised, that was one of the things was a possibility, was getting just that through there, because if it's something that I could do it self-contained, I could possibly do it there.
So anyway, maybe you can tweak this and try to figure out top priority projects with some kind of
Yeah.
price tag, which Harish could then have in hand, say, sit down and work on this,
Right,
and
what
the
the
rest of us
marketing
could
is
go to
for
our
each
reps, I think.
I'll be coordinating that. I'll be in touch. So I know all these things need to happen.
Right, but, the NCIP, meetings, I think our NCIP rep is the chair now. And I'm in correspondence with her, so we can talk about how to go to
Let's do that.
NCIP.
Yeah.
And then you got city council, so, once we have a clear idea of what the ask is, and what's the background, a couple background bullets. This is so old, it's embarrassing,
Yes.
the city should have done it, but it didn't.
Tell our story on each of them.
Yeah, and maybe we need one story for NCIP and one story for city council. Right, for
Possibly.
different things,
Because they're sourcing different things.
yeah.
I understand.
So on this particular thing, I'm on the advocacy group and theoretically we can have more than two of us
Right.
working on
Right.
some subcommittee or whatever. So for this particular thing, that Marcia and Harish.
No,
be
this is
the
more of a
reps.
coordination. It's not an advocacy group. It's an outreach.
Well, I mean, it is.
It is.
Although we have
But
a,
there are common grounds, yes, of course. We are all working for the same library. That is the main common thing. So,
So, whatever you want to do, you can let us know what,
yes,
I'm not sure what you plan, you're gonna be in touch with what? in touch
You would
with
send
what?
us something, Brian would come up with.
exactly.
Brian has to come up with
Priorities.
these things.
And then a strategy of how we're gonna approach this. And then we'll execute it.
specifically
I'll
for
I'll
NCIP.
wait to hear from you, but in the meantime, I'll contact the NCIP person. Find out, how we can.
You didn't hear, the announcement went out, the library's about to close, so.
20 minutes.
Yes,
Um,
just 20 minutes.
One approach that we just throw out from a historic perspective, one thing that I don't think has been an organizing factor or a support statement from the board ever was the fact that a lot of these, a number of these things on our list tonight are as preventive as anything else. It's like new gutters. You know, they're gonna prevent a much more expensive disaster. And some of these are talking about, higher electricity costs being avoided. And, there's another one that was in there that talked about the, more efficient. I don't know, maybe it was heating, I'm not sure. But anyhow, if you would think that if you presented some things in the context of, well, hey, we do this now, you won't have to do a bigger one later.
If you clean the gutters down, you don't have to fix the roof when it falls in, right?
Yeah, or replace it or whatever it is, yeah, or, you know, putting off more than, what did we clear 60 some years. Updating the fuse boxes, that's a preventive thing as much as anything else. Because, you know, the older those electrical components are, the more likely they are to fail. And cause really major, maybe even more destruction. I mean, what do you think causes fires by accident? So, maybe if we could, group them in that way, that would be an effective frame of reference to use when we go talk to the council,
Yes, I think that's excellent.
as opposed to neighborhood groups.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, a penny saved, you know.
And a different frame of reference might be, and NCIP might be successful there, but something like that, hey, we're gonna do something now to save, as a precautionary.
I think that's an excellent idea for city council. But those are the kind of things that you can say, you know, we've got to take care of these things so that it doesn't get worse.
Okay, so timeline, next steps. Brian prioritizes and gives some kind of range of what the cost might be. And possibly also you might recommend which, you know, which approach we should take. I mean, who we should target.
Yeah, no,
Or for the most important ones in your mind.
I just
Do
reread
that,
that.
maybe not all of them.
I just reread the last paragraph and you were basically asking for our guidance. So do you feel like that just got kicked back to you and that is the right next step?
I think, no, it's fine, and I
Okay.
worked through, the guidance is essentially partially that because the board worked prior to me arriving on a larger proposal and a larger project, that's one component, is that we want to make sure that we're aligned with their immediate needs, and I think that we should identify and go after immediate needs for immediate kind of facility upgrades. And the second second part of it is that I'm not gonna submit the NCIP proposal myself, if that's where it's gonna go, you know, and if it's something that's going to be going for not through NCIP, but instead look at private donations or public donations, I still would like for board and Friends and Foundation and other people on board with how are we going to go forward. So that was kind of the piece as well for me, is that I'm fine coming back and looking at a list and a priority and working with my team and connecting with Public Works and seeing if we could just get like just a very general number about what some of the things would cost, and then coming back for the next step. And then whether that's at the next meeting, if you would like me to come back at the next meeting, then fine, and figure out what the timeline is for that.
Or
Yeah.
maybe with the budget process happening now,
Yeah, is that?
Right.
Is that a timer?
have some
Or you need,
communication. How can we do it?
I mean, I could, yeah, I could be working on, you know, having trustees work with trustees on this, but I think that I'm not gonna have like kind of a general kind of cost for everything with
Sure.
sooner than a month. That's in my opinion, I accept it.
And then the other thing I'm thinking, before we go to city council, because of the way these things work, Nat should know so that he's not blindsided.
Yeah.
that we're gonna do that. Because they really, and Hans really blindsided, and we do not want to be in an adversarial relationship.
Yes,
So it's quite possible that, just saying we're planning to talk about this in city council is enough to have them say, oh, well, maybe we better, you know, so I could say in city council, oh, yes, we're funding that, but once we're there, we will send you leadership team. Good.
Okay.
Because last time, you know, before we presented, he wanted to see the presentation.
Yes, he did.
Wanted
That's
to know
fair.
what we were gonna say, because they just do not like to be caught flat-footed
Right.
and, you know, feel uncomfortable, and we do not want that either. We don't want that for your safety.
so last year we presented in April, but we talked to Hans and not, in like February, March.
Okay, so this is coming up.
Yes, it is.
So as far as other budget related items, I mean, what are our priorities? So it's the obvious one, let's get the library, some of these basic things fixed. I mean, do we want to address like new positions? Possible more hours, things like that?
Yeah, so I think that's where we're looking at further discussion on the trend. So that is kind of page 23, 24. If we're looking at the next item for the
Yeah.
fiscal year budget schedule, and
Yeah.
that's typically what would be submitted at that time. Where right now, we're looking at a 5-year kind of estimate about where we standardize, you know, kind of coming in there. We saw the increase for the collection budget last year based on kind of advocating for that, and so I'm going to continue to advocate on there. I'm not sure how the revenue estimates are gonna come in for the citywide or what the city is gonna look at for new positions. But increases to 7 days schedule or increases to evening schedule, something like that are going to cost money, right? And so I think it was a matter for me to look at, is there a priority or any kind of items coming from the board of trustees that say, for this kind of upcoming fiscal year, we would like to see X or Y or Z out there. And then I look at that cost with my team and then come up to the city about navigating that, negotiating that.
Okay, so your new position requests are due February 14th, and that's for our next board meeting. So-
Right.
So. This is something to know.
Well, I have no trouble just trusting Brian to come up with reasonable requests with regard to positions and reporting to us at our meeting later in February what he submitted, you know, like a new librarian at this level or that level. And I've been wondering, it's been a while now since we got the extra funding to open for what, 4 hours on Mondays?
Mhm.
Has that resulted in a significant increase in need for more staff? It's just a question I have. You don't have to answer it now, but just a question I have now. I mean, obviously it increased the utility budget a little bit because the building, the lights are turned on now for 4 hours on Monday and they weren't before that. So I'm just wondering if that has resulted well, then maybe we could say, well, can we up it to 6 instead of 4 hours? Or can we up one of the other days to an evening, you know, 6 to 8 or something? But use if it's valid, you know, the results of the 4-hour increase that we got as kind of the foundation for asking for more. If, you know, we're going down a toilet because we opened up for 4 hours on Monday, then I wouldn't waste a second asking for more hours because we're already losing with the ones we got. So I'm just trying to think strategy based on actual results.
Right, and one of the things we talked about a while back was that we have no evening hours now.
Yeah,
And it would be very nice, at least one evening a week, to have evening hours for the people
sure.
who can't come in. And there's no library on the peninsula open on Sunday. still, I believe.
And we used the same kind of logic, Marcia, I think, correct me, when we said we need to be open on the weekends, because we would, first, we were thinking 5 days a week maybe. And then,
We're 5 days a week.
and we said the same, with the same reasoning, which is correct, I believe, that we need to be open on the weekends, because some people couldn't come on a weekday, they work or something.
We got Saturday,
And so we got Saturday, now we got a little bit more on Monday, and
but you do remember that pre-pandemic, we were open 7 days a week.
sure.
Until.
But I'd like to at least, I think, substantiate the request if it occurs for more hours and or staff on some positive results of what we did get.
And also in light of the fact that every other agency has recovered fully since the pandemic, except maybe the library and the sports center, I don't know, either rec, and I don't know about the other ones, but the library certainly hasn't recovered because we only have 5.5 days a week and we used to be 7. And so I think, I don't know, if given the funding, you would want to be open 7 days a week, but I would think that it would be nice.
Of course, it's nice, I don't know if that's what the needs are in terms of evening versus Sunday, and I will say that adding an additional day adds the additional need for a regular manager or staff person. How do you balance that person where you have somebody every Sunday, like as part of, because I think it's better to have a regular person anytime you have a day of the week, that way you go through, and it's not somebody saying, well, I don't know, I'm only here
Yeah.
Sundays, right? And they, I will say, for example, as for moving out, opening the Monday hours, I believe we were able to have 2 more hours every week than Pacific Grove, which is great. So we increase over them. And then, Carmel, I think they're trying to open Saturday. They've lost their weekend hours during the pandemic. So some of the libraries lost hours, and also because some of our staff work at multiple sites. They work at Marina, they work at Seaside, they work at PG, they work at Carmel, and they work at different libraries. So we're often pulling from each other for that kind of coverage. And I think Carmel, from what I know, I think they're trying to open, or looking at opening Saturdays, but they haven't since the pandemic.
So they're not open on weekends at all?
At all, Monday through Friday, and they haven't been able to, so. Yeah, so that's been difficult, I think, for them, because, they do get a lot of tourists Saturdays and Sundays, of course, to Carmel. But also for a lot of their residents, they just don't have access. And I think, because if you look at extending hours, whether you're extending 2 hours, so if it's Monday, 2 to 6 for us, and 2 to 8, where would the best,
The sweet spot.
where would be the best spot for that? Because I do like, one piece with my staff also is that, some libraries where you have it where the schedule jumps around a lot is very difficult. It's very confusing and difficult for the public. So because we have the Monday afternoon, and we do have our regular team, it's a small team, but a lot of on-call hours too, and volunteers coming in to help support. That would be, to me, something where if I were to increase an evening, I would probably look at something like Monday personally. Because then you have a
Shift it up.
Yeah,
shift it up.
and make it 2 to 8 instead of 10 to 6.
And then the rest of the days are pretty consistent with other libraries out there. And that helps us kind of communicate hours, everything there. And do that, and then you're not having to bridge another full day of a full-timer,
Yes.
another person out there on another day of the week. So that would be something that I think would be a goal that I could try to navigate through this budget process. Is what would that cost be to do something?
Yeah, I think increasing to 6 days a week, 6 hours each day, and one of those is from 2 to 8.
Yes.
That sounds like a lot of the consistency that I agree with you is helpful to the public.
Yeah.
And they can say, well, they're open, from 2 to, they're open 6 hours every day. 6 days a week, not Sundays.
Well, and this might not be as easy to sell as a budget increase, but I had my mind opened by Kim today when we were talking about, the makerspace and she enlightened me that maybe more staff in the current open hours would be helpful also. To be able to staff some of the programs that the, the people who are on hand are spread too thin to do. So could you do more in our hours, and is that a priority, or is increasing hours the?
I mean, there's a couple of pieces to that. One is that I see that as specifically, like if you're out of full-time or, a regular part-time on something like that, that's gonna be a high cost, and I think that's gonna be a challenge, honestly, to get approved if it's a full-time position specifically for a project, because like add-on. Wherein if you have it similar to how a recreation or sports center says, like, we're gonna offer this service. And it's an on-call hours, and then we say. This is going to be, I guess, the option that I brought forward to Kim the other day is I said, the state has grants available for possible team volunteers. You have like that are interns, you have college students and teams that are paid by grant and the state to run these as like a short term, so that it's not a full-time position that you're hiring in the middle of the day to run a program and you're not running it every single day. Right. And that's the part of it, is like, you want to say to somebody, like, if you go to Hilltop Park and you're gonna go to the ceramics class, the ceramics person's gonna be there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday night when they have the ceramics thing, right? And then so that's, I think that the difference is that if we were to say, I need 6 hours a week to do makerspace program, and I need 6 hours for that, that's a direct cost, and then you don't have all the associated retirement and benefits and other pieces out there which are harder to, in my mind, to advocate for. So I think it's something I could advocate for, that single program side, but it'll have more on-call costs.
Yeah, that was the example that we were talking about, but I hadn't even thought of it that way.
So possibly extending hours on Monday and getting more, on-call or regular, not regular part-time, but more part-time hours.
Yeah, and I think, but you would have to really dedicate that. For example, we have a person that's in report that one of our pages has been working with Dennis and I on California history projects. And that's something where, for the majority of time, they work specifically on that project, right? And it's not like I'm gonna pull them off of there. So it's like every week, I want to do this. I don't want to say like every single week, hey, let's do a call for service. Hey, who's available? I want to say, come in, you're gonna do this program Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or whatever day that's gonna be, and then they do a program, and then we have that on the calendar. And it's pretty standard that if somebody's sick or out, we work through that way, right? But it's common, because that's how recreation works. When you have a program,
But it's a little dangerous to have those kind of grant funds, right? Because the grant runs out.
right, and that's.
Unless it's a program that has a termination date.
Yeah, so that's where it's an option, but that's where I do find though that we could have, it's easier for me to advocate, I would just say. It would be easier for me to advocate for more like hours program wise, rather than saying I need 30 hours a week to run one or two programs a week.
Okay.
Being real specific about it.
Yeah. That gives me a direct ask for the city to say, this is what you would get out of it.
So you probably have enough information from us now to go ahead with the position request.
Yeah, unless there are other kind of, budget items, or, I mean, we talked about like facility, those are kind of the other piece out there. But if the collection, we had an increase, and if we can consider if the collection budget, my recommendation is the collection budget does not go down, the statement board goes up. That would be my other kind of recommendation here for that piece. But I don't know if there was any other.
Nope.
but okay, but having a Monday evening and then kind of programming hours.
Programming.
Would be, it will be helpful for me for going forward.
You did pretty well last year, they gave you like
Yeah.
some new positions, so this year, we were. And then all of these facility needs go into the capital, and they're not gonna go into. Operating.
They won't go anywhere on their own.
Right, exactly.
We do
Or they haven't historically, let's put it that way.
That's right.
In fact, they haven't
Good
even,
observation.
they haven't even when, you know, we hired people and we talked to everybody and that's the frustrating part.
Just needed to do more talking.
Okay, so the only thing we have left are trustee comments and then library director comments. Trustees? Anybody?
Nothing to add.
I think,
Okay, Brian?
Yeah,
Last
I'll
final-
just add that, I've reached out to, our library consortium, Pacific Library Partnership and MOBAC regarding, advocacy, the kind of where the advocacy priorities from California Library Association. So I've shared those with their advocacy chair. But I've also asked them about our next MOBAC meeting, which is our regional library consortium, about us scheduling the time so we can look at what they call the day in the district. California Library Association does a day. They try to do a day in the district where you reach out to your state assembly, your different folks, your representatives, and talk about the library. But because there's multiple libraries, it's great if we coordinate this piece. So that's at our next MOBAC meeting. And with that, it might be good to bring out, usually a friend foundation or trustee or something like that, if possible, depending on how coordination goes, but like, that would be something we would be coordinating.
When is the next meeting? You don't know yet.
My MOBAC meeting, I believe, is next month, but and then they typically do the outreach in late February and to mid-March, just to do that. And so it'll be just a good thing to talk about
Yeah,
priorities. And I think there was like the Freedom to Read Act, which was Don Mattis, about that. In every library, we sent our collection development policy to the state library to review if it's consistent with that act. So I will be in touch with the board more about this in the future. In that case.
So I just been copies of your email about the day in the district and the CLA priorities, but I mean, should I give those out to folks or no?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. It's just, yeah. This is. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah.
And-
Oh, we're trying to. That's not it.
Yep. And also, in the advocacy line, I was part of an online session from ALA, not CLA, and, which was how to increase funding and support in the community. And so these are the titles of the programs, and they're available online, and I can, but only by logging in through my account. So if anybody is interested in those, let me know. And
Can I ask you a question about CLI, because I don't really understand the way this works. When they say they request money in one-time funding, who are they asking? Who are they asking for money? The Governor Newsom, the state legislature? Is that-
State
So
legislature.
the CLA lobbies the state legislature, lobbying organization of the state legislature to get all the libraries in California funded.
So they have a legislative committee and then they have CLA has a lobbying group. And so they are looking at funding for state funding for libraries.
Thank you.
yeah, thanks everyone. Long but helpful. Is there?
which door do we go out without setting off the
All
alarm?
right.
Oh, either way, you'll be okay.
Move to adjourn?
Yeah.
Adjourn?
Adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
My invisible gavel.
Okay.
Thank you all.
So we lock the back door, Brian, without setting off in the